record this. Okay. Yeah. So let's jump in here. So many of you who are joining live here, you may know me, you may not. We may work together, but I'm Bill Rabbit, one of the managing partners of CFS, or College Funding Services, and we are lucky enough to have Marissa join us today for a live webinar for a super important topic. And it's going to revolve around sort of the admissions process. And, we were lucky enough to connect with Marissa a few weeks ago, and we've made a really big push to connect with just other really good, solid people in this college space, because there are a lot of folks there, but we really like to connect with the good people in this space, and Marissa is absolutely one of those. She's doing a great job at sort of educating families on the admissions process, and at CFS we are, our expertise lies within the financial aid kind of component and approaching college from a financially strategic angle. But we're very aware of the fact that the admissions process is a huge independent sort of beast in and of itself. Okay, and there's ways to navigate that in the most appropriate way. So when we connected with Marissa and hearing the things that she's doing and trying to educate that consumer, and that's part of our mission is we want our clients, and even if you don't work with us, from some of the content that we provide, we want you to become an educated college consumer. And I think Marissa, her goal is the same. So we're very lucky to have her here. And so Marissa, why don't you, I'll open up the floor to you, kind of introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to kind of becoming the founder of Talk College to Me.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for the intro. So my background, and I'm seeing Melissa here, is from Northern Westchester. For a lot of years, I actually lived in New York City, got a lot of New York folks here, worked in Westchester for PepsiCo. I was did a lot of marketing manager for beverages. And as I was doing this, I did a lot of recruiting for different jobs back at the University of Michigan, which is where I attended college. And I just realized that I loved my college experience way more than a lot of people did, than a lot of my friends. I really found the right fit and the perfect place for me. And as I went back and talked to these students, I just realized what an impact the right college made on a student in terms of the success that they had in life, about the people that they met, and just kind of finding the right classes and the right professors and the right really friends and network and different opportunities. And I just felt so passionately about this. And as I would travel all over the country for work, I found myself just like escaping to college campuses to explore them. I did a lot of work volunteering with nonprofits, helping families navigate the college admissions. And I decided eventually to start this full time. For a couple of years now, I have been helping families, specifically parents. I focus on parents, helping them navigate the college admissions process from start to finish, because I believe that when the parent is completely empowered, it really allows the parents to then help the student to navigate the whole process and really excel in high school and the activities that they do, and in the different way that they approach the college admissions process, and finding not necessarily the highest ranked school, and it may be the case, but the best fitting school for their kids. And I still truly believe that kids are the ones who are going to write the applications, write the essays, and fill it all out. But to have parents who really understand the process, and I knew a lot of parents were just so nervous and really didn't understand the whole process. And I found that I just really had a way to connect with everybody and teach it in a way that's like not so scary. It really makes sense. So it's really my true passion, and I'm so excited to work with you, because I know that you guys are your expertise is in the financial aid space, and I always touch a little bit about that, but that's a whole beast in and of itself. So I love to partner together because I have a different expertise, and I'll tonight talk to you guys here about the mistakes to avoid on the Common Application. So this is so important. I know we got tons of seniors here. So whether you have your kid is already like filled out a ton and you're almost ready to submit those early decision or early action applications, or you're just getting started, or somewhere in between. I hope and I know that this webinar tonight is going to be so sorry. It's nighttime for me. I'm in a different area, daytime for you guys, but I know it's going to be so helpful for you, and we've got some really special stuff to share.
Yeah, so thank you for the intro. That's great. And Marissa is going to share with us a little bit later on about, more about her company, Talk College to Me, and the resources that, she has to offer. So I look forward to hearing more about that. Because there's going to be a ton of content in today's webinar, we're going to hold off on any Q&A. Okay, but we're going to share Marissa's contact information at the end of the presentation today, but also in the follow-up email. So any questions that might pop up that you want to maybe connect with Marissa directly on, we're going to share her information. But just the final note before I sort of pass the torch back to Marissa is that, we're very aligned with a lot of the things that you just said, where, this is a very emotional process, okay? Whether it's admissions or financial aid, this whole college journey. And we try to do our best at reminding folks that, hey, listen, yes, there are a lot of moving parts here, and it's scary, it's emotional, but, we are getting ready to send your baby boy, baby girl up, out to the world for the very first time. Okay, so we're very mindful to, as many times as we can kind of work that in, we do. But the other thing as well is we've been doing this for close to 15 years, and it's really not a surprise, and it's not to the consumer's fault that maybe parents aren't as educated as they should be or can be when it comes time for this process. Because of that, it's a scary topic. Okay, we're not only, we're thinking about, okay, our baby is going off to college, but now we're thinking about these huge sticker prices, these big checks to be written. So just from a biological standpoint, something scary like that, you're not running to the library to get yourself educated. So that makes
right.
sense. But, what we try to do, and from my experience with you, Marissa, and seeing how you kind of run your business as well, what we're trying to do is kind of bring down that scariness. Let's talk about this in very direct terms, with the goal being, hey, let's get educated on one of the biggest investments of our lives here. So, we're very much aligned in that in the approach to how we kind of run our businesses, and really how we're trying to educate our families. Let's do this. Let's keep in mind that, yes, it is going to be emotional. It's going to be a lot of things to it, but you can get through it if you kind of take it step by step. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll get started. And to your point, if you guys, for everybody here, we got lots of attendees, and I like for you guys to all see that you're in the same place. So type yes into the chat box there. If you are feeling emotional, if you're nervous, if you're worried about the sticker price and getting into the right college, just give us a yes, because I think it's so helpful for you guys to see that you are really all in the same place together.
Flowing in, right?
Capital letters. Yes, exclamation point.
Especially too, guys, with these early action, early decision deadlines, 11/1, November 1st is right around the corner, and you could kind of feel that pressure. So it all makes sense. We certainly appreciate it. I know Marissa does, but hopefully today is going to help you a little bit with regard to the Common App and things like that. But I guess with that being said, Marissa, why don't you take it away, run through here. And like I said, any questions you have, make sure you write it down, and then we're going to share Marissa's information afterwards, and you could connect with her directly.
Yeah, so we'll try to be quick, and I love all of the yeses coming in there. You guys it is an emotional time. So just to start out, I know just some one quick housekeeping thing. A lot of people often ask for the slides afterwards. So a lot of you, I hope, were able to download the worksheet beforehand. So you'll be able to kind of fill in the blank, take notes. If you want the slides, and I'll run through this quick, literally just open up your phone right now if you have it. Just open up your email to support@talkcollegetome.com. You can type in the message here, but if you just literally put subject line slide, you don't have to write anything. Just send an email really quick. I'm just gonna write this in the chat box really quickly. So feel free to just right now, again, on your phone, wherever, open it up, send an email with that and the slides, or sorry, subject line slides, and I will send that to you guys afterwards. So you don't have to worry. If you want to listen, take notes if you can, do that worksheet, but just super helpful. So one other quick thing I like to do is a quick piece of trivia that I'll answer at the end. So would love for you guys, I don't know if anybody has any guesses, just a fun little thing is which college allows pets to live in their dorm rooms and has a special pet graduation ceremony for outgoing pets. So just a little fun thing, and I will answer that at the very end for any pet lovers out there. All right, so as we talked about tonight, I know as you guys are all working on the Common Application with your kids, it's a complicated thing. The college admissions process, just like the financial aid side, has a lot of moving parts, and unfortunately, it's not super straightforward. It's not as simple as I'd love it to be. I wish I didn't have a job to do, but it is complicated, and I love helping you guys. So I'm going to share the 11 most common mistakes that kids tend to make on the application, and so you can then help all of you avoid those mistakes. So number one is listing activities in the wrong order. So some of you may have started already. So and just so I know, type yes into the chat box as I'm going through this. If you guys are already looking at this with your kid, if you've already started, just so I have an idea. But the point here is in the activities section, your kid is able to list 10 different activities, up to 10. They don't have to list all of them that they're involved in anytime throughout just their high school time. Some people ask if they could do like elementary school, junior high. I really recommend just those activities from high school. And it's really important here. It doesn't tell you on the application to list them in any certain way. So my number one suggestion here is to list them from like space number 1 as the very most important activity in your opinion, down in order of less importance as you go down to activity 2, 3, 4, up to 10 if you have them. So as we mentioned before, I do have an online course that I'll talk about later. And inside of my course, I have basically it's a worksheet that allows you to assign a number value to the importance. So there's no kind of guessing like, well, which one is the most important? But the things to kind of take into account are, there's 5 different things that I like to talk about. So the number of years of participation. So that's, if your child just did something senior year, it's probably going to be less important than if it's something they might have been involved in sophomore, junior, and senior year. The second part is the number of hours per week or per month. So, if it's a club in high school that maybe they just joined for lunch, 1 hour every month, that's probably going to be less important, than a sports team or playing a musical instrument where they're practicing maybe multiple hours every day or several times a week. Number 3 is leadership. So if your kid is just a participant, maybe they show up, they don't really do anything. I had a student once tell me to think about the 5-minute rule. If your kid didn't show up in the first 5 minutes of a meeting or a team practice, something like that, would anybody notice? Would it matter? Those are going to be less important than maybe somewhere where they are the president or the captain or something like that. Number 4 is recognition or honors. So this could be, first chair as a musician. It could be an MVP as an athlete. It could be president of a debate team. Other different honors. Maybe they were elected to something, or they nominated, only 3 people in the state, or something like that. So the greater the recognition at the school level, the state level, the country level, internationally, that would be fantastic. It happens less often. But that is the 4th criteria. And then lastly is the impact that they make on the community. This is something that colleges really take into account. Was it something they just did themselves, or maybe it impacted your neighborhood or the entire school or, you know, a statewide fundraiser or something like that. So those are the 5 things that I like to consider. And again, inside of my course, I have a really official way to assign points so you can understand. But the general takeaway here is list those things in order of most important to least important. So number 2 is listing unclear activities as a mistake. So in that activity section, in addition to listing them in the right order, we're going to talk a lot about activities tonight. It's really important to make sure you specify, or your kid specifies, what that organization might be. So some things might be clear, you know, obviously if it's editor of the school newspaper, president of the debate team, you know, first chair of a, you know, violin orchestra, something like that, you know, generally college admissions officers are going to understand what that is. If you were to say, you know, I was in, or your kid was an intern at Alexander Research Society, making this up, you know, what does that mean? A college admissions officer, even though it's something that your kid is so familiar with, they may have no idea what that is. So what you might say instead is intern Alexander Research Society, a medical branch of the Center for Disease Control or something like that. And then you would explain, their kid would explain what they did. So it's a very limited space. So this is something to, you know, as you guys may have noticed if you've helped your kids start this process, is that it is, there's a limited number of characters that you can put into these, a number of words that you can go. So these don't have to be full sentences. You know, it doesn't have to be grammatically correct here. Think of it almost more like a resume. And then that really should go as many words as you can kind of fit in there to properly explain what that organization is and any kind of position that your kid held. So that's number 2. Number 3 is kind of an extension of this, is not taking advantage of the resume. So as we just talked about, that space really is limited. You really, within those activities, don't have much space to explain exactly what it is or what your kid has been doing as part of that organization or team or whatever it may be. So the resume is really the spot where you guys are able, your kid is able to elaborate. What I like to think about is kind of the different things that they've done throughout their time in high school. So on that activity section that we just talked about before, let's go back to the school newspaper. Maybe their senior year, they're editor of the school newspaper. And so that's like the most important role that they've held, and that's what they would put in that, you know, as their position as part of that activities. But, you know, throughout their year, you know, maybe freshman, they were just a part of the team and they wrote some articles. Maybe sophomore year, they were like the treasurer of the, you know, the newspaper. In junior year, they were like co-editor, and senior year, they were the prime editor there. So it would show the different roles that they've held throughout, and it kind of shows the progression. And inside a resume, they're really able to elaborate on some of those different roles that they've had throughout the time. So not every school one asks for a resume or accepts a resume. Sometimes they say it's optional. If it says optional, I absolutely recommend including it. And some will require it, not quite as often, but usually it's an optional one. And I always, this is a mistake that I say to avoid, is use this resume opportunity to your advantage to give elaboration on some of those things they weren't able to share in the activity section. So when you think about the common application as a whole, you really want it to tell a full story, and you don't want it to necessarily be super repetitive. So you want the essays to play a role, the activities will play a role, letters of recommendation, and then the resume, again, it's going to be a lot of the same activities as those lists of 10, but you're going to be able to go a lot deeper and share things with the college admissions officer that you just couldn't fit in there. So again, inside of my course, I have a lot of detail about exactly how to write a resume, a great tool to format it, how to use those power words and the verbs that I spent a lot of time in my business years working on. So if you have questions about that, inside the course is a great opportunity. But in general, just remember to take advantage of the resume. All right, so moving on to mistake number 4 that people often make is writing generic essays. So if you guys are deep into these applications, you're probably already familiar with a lot of these questions. Your kid maybe is struggling. But here's where I like to say that your kid, they don't want to write a generic story that anybody could, insert yourself and write. So for example, I was an athlete. It was a big impact in my life. But if I just wrote about, how hard work on my team paid off and then we won the state championship, making this up, insert a lot of kids who can tell the same story. That being said, you can still use athletics or any topic, but what you want to do is share a really specific moment in time. And this is really for the personal statement, especially to talk about a time, let's say I even wanted to use sports. Maybe it was a particular moment in practice where I was got an injury or, had a failure or, got in a tough spot running suicides or, doing these hard drills. Any really specific story that shows a value that I have that then is an example of what I've learned and how that has had an impact on me and what I want to do in the future and how college can help me get there. So it's a lot to think about, but in general, for any of the essays, whether it's the personal statement, what I call the YS essay, which is colleges are mostly going to say some sort of essay asking, why does your kid want to attend our particular school? There's a very particular way to answer that. And then there's a lot of supplemental essay questions that each school might ask about a challenge your kid has faced or overcome adversity or something like that. So with any essay, it's really important to pick a specific moment in time, pick a specific story, and to show the example of what they mean rather than just telling a generic example that anybody could share. So again, inside the course, and we can feel free to follow up with me afterwards if you have specific questions. But it's really important to, I'll teach you how exactly to pick that specific topic, to choose the story, to show those values, to answer the YS essay question. But in general, again, make sure it's less important. A lot of kids really feel like they need to show this huge important moment that, they won the Nobel Peace Prize or, got elected to some major thing, or it's not necessarily the case. So an example I like to give, one of my favorites, I actually was talking to an admissions officer from Eckerd College in Florida, and he said his favorite his favorite essay that he's ever read was about a girl who was photographing slugs, like that little slimy animal. And it just goes to show you, she told why that was so important and why she wanted to, it tied into what she wanted to study and why she wanted to go to that college and what she wanted to do one day. But the point here is that it doesn't have to be like this big grand thing. Sometimes the smaller, really special moments or fun examples that like bring out your kid's personality are the best ones. So type yes here if you're starting to understand what I mean by that. Tell a story, show, don't tell, and don't make it generic. So just want to make sure you guys are all on the page here. Love it. So Deborah says yes to Shiva. We've got Carl, Jane, Mike.
Just to jump in, piggyback on that, I couldn't agree more. And we've done a couple of interviews with some other admissions folks, and really that's the common theme is that, authenticity really is what jumps off the page to these admissions folks. Don't try to tell the story that you think they want to hear. Be authentic, be yourself, and the authenticity is really what jumps off the page. So I just thought I wanted to share that because that's really, as I learn more and more about the admissions process, the more that we have these type of webinars. That's been a really common theme that has jumped off the page to me.
Yeah, thank you so much for pointing that out. And it's hard. I know we have a limited amount of time here. I'm trying to share everything I can, to a point where we can still get through this. But to be super authentic and to pick those values. And again, I'll teach you in a separate way how to find those values. But it's really about college admissions officers. They don't want to see like that your kid has done every single thing under the sun that everybody can do. They're really looking for unique individuals who are special, who know themselves, who have a passion, and who know where they're going. And it doesn't have to be, if that essay talks about becoming a marine biologist, making this up, and they get to school and decide they love political science, like that's okay, but just try to help your kid understand in this moment of time, who they are, like what excites them. Think about your kid, like what do they talk about all day? What could they potentially want to study? And be really authentic to who they are. And that is what's really going to show up to college admissions officers and jump off of the page. So I love all the yeses here, Mike, Jenny, Mark, Jane, everybody, Carl. So thank you guys. I think I'm going to keep moving on here, but again, we can follow up with this later. All right. So mistake number 5 that kids make is using precious space for repetitive information. So this one's not quite as intuitive. This is something I really learned as I started mastering the college admissions process and really studying this. And it's not anything anyone ever told me. So what I mean by this is if in the activity section, you're writing one thing, and then in your essays, you're saying the exact same thing that you can see within the activities, and then maybe the person who's writing the letter of recommendation also is saying the exact same thing. So again, let's say it's about political science, and every single activity is about that. Then in your essays, maybe you want to write more about a different value, maybe a value that your kid learned from their grandfather or a sibling or a kid or volunteering or something that doesn't necessarily show through in an activity, if that makes sense. So maybe they've been part of the debate team and they've volunteered or done a program in Washington, D.C., really grooming themselves for political science. And you can see that in the activities. You can see that in the resume. So use that essay space for to explain to college admissions officers why political science is important to your kid. What was that moment in time that they really got that spark and got excited by it? And how is that school going to help them achieve their goals in the future? Why is that school important? What are the challenges they faced that might not be part of the debate team, but were part of an interaction that they had with a sibling when they were younger? Again, I'm totally making these things up, but the point is colleges, as much as you can show who your kid is and why they're this way, and really think of the application. Again, I wish I had a chart in front of me, but again, you have kind of that activity section, the resume, the essays, and those letters of recommendation. There's kind of those 4 buckets, and really try to use this, I call it this limited space. It's a lot when you come to think about it, but make sure that each part of that application is really shining through in a different way. So again, type yes if you're now on board, if you're starting to understand mistake number 5, and things are going to overlap. Don't go too crazy about it. Valerie, Janie, yes, everybody love it. So again, don't go crazy, but as much as you can, just try to help your kid think through what's that broader story and how can they really leverage different parts of the application to tell that cohesive story. All right, so mistake number 6 is not answering all supplemental and optional questions. So quick, just with the optional questions, for the most part, anytime a college application says this question's optional, your kid should probably fill it out and answer it. And the reason for this is that as much as you're applying to a school, everybody wants to make sure it's a good fit. So colleges have, I almost think about it like musical chairs. They have a certain number of spots to fill within their school each year. And if they accept too many students and not enough choose to attend that school, they're not going to bring in enough money. They're a business just like anybody else, and they're trying to fill exact right number of spots. So in your kid's application, the more that they can show their true interest in the school, and the more it seems, and hopefully they do, really want to attend that school, it's going to work both ways. A college is going to be more interested in your kid than someone who doesn't take the time to fill out all those optional questions. So anything that's optional, make sure they really do go above and beyond to show that they've invested the time, they're answering those questions. So that's kind of the optional piece. Take a sip of water, and I'll get to the supplemental. Okay. The supplemental questions, a lot of these are required, so it's not as much about being optional as much as you want to make sure ahead of time that your kid knows that these questions exist. So inside the common application, there's kind of the general, all of the name, their information, education, the different scores, things like that they're going to submit to every school. And then there's going to be specific questions. A lot of schools will ask sometimes anywhere from 1 to 3 supplemental essay questions. And if your kid doesn't like add all of the schools they think they want to apply to and really just go into the application and look at these questions ahead of time, what you don't want to happen, and I know this kind of sounds like common sense, but you would be surprised, is that kids are going to, go and be ready to, maybe it's a week before they're ready to submit a bunch of different, applications in this one deadline, and realize that like, oh my gosh, there's these 2 essays that people ask and I haven't written anything about this, and I'm going to have to, write it really quickly, and that's where the errors come in. That's where the essays aren't as good, and that's where, things are rushed and it gets sloppy. So again, I know it sounds like common sense, but just make sure your kid has added all the schools they think they might apply to, and make sure they go in and read all of those supplemental essay questions. And again, inside my course, they have a way to kind of like look at all the different essay questions that have been asked across schools and try to see if there's ways to save time and kind of look at some of those essays that might be able to tweak and use for other schools to kind of save time. But again, just make sure that they know everything that they're going to have to answer for each school. All right, we're flying along here. So mistake number 7, again, it seems like common sense, but you'd be surprised, is not proofreading for spelling and grammar mistakes. And even like the appearance of how things look. So hopefully this is where I love talking to you as parents. Again, I really truly feel like your kid is the one, they're on their computer, they're in that Word document, they're writing everything, but it is totally allowed for you as a parent or any teachers who might be willing to look over things to make sure that nothing's spelled wrong. Really simple, like they versus the, there or there. No simple spelling mistakes, no grammatical mistakes, like commas are in the right area. Again, I know it sounds straightforward, but this really, really makes a huge impact. If they have small errors, grammatical errors, spelling errors, formatting issues, it's not always the end of the world, but if there's 2 students and they're looking for one spot and all things else being equal, one is perfectly correct with all of their spelling and grammar and all of that, and the other one is a little bit sloppier, they're going to choose the one where, everything is nice and tidy. So this is really important. Help your kid. Make sure you look it over. And this is where I really, we'll talk about the deadlines, but I like to give things space. So as early as they can start writing those essays, so you can kind of like take a step back, give it a few days, give it a week where they're not looking at it, because it's in those times where you're just like, I'm sure you've all been there, editing and relooking and relooking and relooking to the point where you can't even focus and you don't even know what it says anymore, and that's where the sloppiness comes in. So encourage your kids to really finish these essays early, take a step back, look at it together. And then the one advice I can give you is that, as you're writing these, there's inside the Common App, there's spaces for you to write essays and the activities list. I really highly recommend writing all of the essays and those activities on a Google Doc or a Word document, some sort of word processing separate. Write it all out, because you're going to be able to see it and check for spelling and grammar and really see it all together before you copy and paste it into the application. So again, maybe you're already doing this. Some parents are like, I never thought to do that. What a good idea. And then there's actually a way right before your kid is, once it's all complete, before they're ready to submit the application, you can preview it as a PDF document. And I highly, highly, highly recommend doing this because you just never know, like even if things are all correct in the Word document, when you go to copy and paste it, maybe an essay is formatted a little bit incorrectly, or they forgot to copy the last 2 sentences, or, the first letter got cut off, or things like that. So save it as a PDF. Make sure you guys all take a look at it 1, 2, 3 more times. Like, this is the time to really make sure things are right. So type yes if you guys are on board with this. You're ready to help your kids make sure there's no simple errors. Very quick with those. Got it. Jane, Carl, Deborah, love it. So yes, yes, yes. All right, quickly here. So mistake number 8 is missing deadlines. And I talked about this just a second ago a little bit. But here's what I mean by this. The deadlines that schools give you for whether it's early action, early decision, regular decision, rolling, anything, they might have a deadline, a specific date, a specific time. It may vary school by school. So make sure, one, even if it's early action, call it, it might be different from school to school. So just make sure you have a list. don't miss the deadline. That's kind of the first part of this. But in addition to that, I recommend what I give calling false deadlines. So with your kid, I really recommend, I say 3 days minimum. A week would be great to submit the application 3 days to a week earlier than it says to do this. And I know a lot of people are often down like crunch time to the last minute. With the Common Application, there are hundreds of thousands of people, of students on this website submitting things down to the wire at 11:59 p.m. on that deadline, and things crash. It is not unusual. It's not unheard of for the website to crash during this time because there's so many people on it. So schools do not care. It's not like turning in a paper where you can slide it in later. It is a deadline, and it is online, and they keep track of it. And if your kid misses that submission deadline, they're not going to get to apply. So set that false deadline, get them in earlier. You're all going to feel a lot better. If things go wrong, you'll have the time. All right. So one other thing for anybody, go ahead. Yeah.
Just to jump in there, just because deadlines are absolutely paramount. A couple of things there that these colleges don't make it easy on families. Each college is going to have their own particular deadline. Okay, and that goes for admissions, and that also goes for financial aid. A common misconception is that when the admissions applications are due, that's the same deadline as the financial aid applications, okay? That can be the case, but most times it is completely different. The admissions process and the financial aid process are kind of independent workflows, and likely have different financial aid deadlines. So I only share that because I know I had some clients who, they felt like they couldn't submit a Common App because their FAFSA or CSS profile wasn't ready. Okay, that's not the case. And typically the financial aid deadlines sort of follow and trail behind the admissions deadlines. However, that being said, we can't make blanket recommendations because every school kind of runs their business their own way. So their deadlines are paramount, but just keep in mind that admissions and financial aid deadlines don't run parallel to one another. Just felt like that'd be a good place to throw that in there.
It absolutely is, and that's where I love coming together with our different expertise. So to really be aware of not only of the college deadlines, those are different, often the financial aid, and as you guys have probably worked together, there's different, whether it's the state deadlines versus schools sometimes have their own individual deadlines. So there's a lot of deadlines to keep track of. It is a complicated process, and as much as you can be organized, and I have a tool inside my course that helps keep track of all of those things, but there's a lot of moving pieces, and it's really important to as a parent, help your kid as much as you can to stay organized and make sure you're on top of all of those dates. And we're down to crunch time now, so I can feel your pain. I know there's a lot going on in your households, and it's a stressful time, so hopefully we're here to help you guys. So one other quick thing, if anybody joined late and wants to follow along and wants a copy of these slides, send an email to me at support@talkcollegetome.com. Again, literally you can just open up your phone, whatever phone you have, open up an email, just put subject line slides, and I will send you a copy of this as a PDF afterwards. So keep going here. All right. So where are we? Mistake number 9 is forgetting to check if all documents have been submitted by third parties. So this is a mistake that can be costly. So when that deadline comes, there's your kids filling out all of the information inside the Common Application, all their essays, all the information. There's a couple of other things to be aware of. The first are teacher recommendations. So even if your kid has asked a teacher and it's the most wonderful teacher in the world to write their recommendation, that teacher's probably writing anywhere from 10, 20, depending on the size of the school, other letters of recommendation, and things get lost. So just remind your kid to make sure and check that the teacher letters of recommendation have been submitted, and remind that teacher to submit it a little bit early if possible, if they haven't already done so. The second is the transcript. So at a lot of schools, the guidance counselor, the college admissions officer, they're the ones who are responsible for submitting official transcripts. So inside the Common App, your kid will actually self-report some of their senior year classes and their grades and things like that. But the school, all the colleges are going to require an official transcript. And again, just make sure your kid is checked with the guidance counselor. Sometimes it's on the families to submit it. Sometimes it's the college admissions counselor or someone else. But just make sure whoever it is, it's been submitted. And then lastly, what a lot of families don't realize is that kids are actually often required to submit what's called a mid-year and sometimes even an end-of-year report. So if your kid is applying first semester, early action, early decision, things like that, they are going to, they won't have their grades from this semester yet. And schools really want to see, they want to make sure your kid is taking hard classes still. They want to make sure, they're not, they haven't been a straight A student in the senior year. Senioritis comes along. It's a real thing, I promise. Your kid's getting like straight D's. Colleges can actually take back, it's not common, but it can happen that they can rescind an offer. So just be aware of this, be mindful, help your kids still be motivated as much as they can. I understand that as much as the next, but you will have to submit that mid-year report that says these were your grades for first semester, sometimes end of the year too. And the same goes, sometimes it's on the family, sometimes the school will do it for you. Just make sure you know. All right. Number 10 is using an inappropriate email address. This is actually one of my favorites. And again, I swear a lot of these seem like common sense, but sometimes kids will, as they log on to the Common Application and put in their information, they'll use an email address that's like Hello Kitty or like Soccer 101, or they can be more inappropriate sometimes. But make sure if they're doing this, even if that's the email they normally use, create a separate email account that says, for me, it would say like marissa.medin@gmail.com, at yahoo.com, whatever it is. First dot last name is what I recommend instead of anything with like numbers, nicknames, things like that. And then lastly, again, I know it seems simple, but the last mistake, number 11, to avoid is forgetting to click submit. So I know truly this happens. There's so many parts of the application and they're filling in so many different aspects of all of the answers and the essays, and it's a little bit confusing. So as it's all filled out, you actually have to go in and submit the application for each individual school, even within the Common Application. So there's a little dashboard on the Common App, and I can go inside into my course, and I have a special workshop that I'll give to you guys as a bonus for anyone who might be interested in joining. But it's really important to make sure that on the Common Application, when they log in, there's a whole dashboard that has like little green, red, yellow circles, just to make sure everything is submitted.